A quiet roadside cafe, a normal afternoon, until everything changes. When unexpected visitors arrive, trouble is brewing, and one man is about to step up in ways no one saw coming. What happens next will leave you speechless. Stay until the end to see how it all unfolds. Don't forget to like, subscribe, and share your thoughts in the comments. What would you do in this situation? The afternoon sun cast long shadows on the deserted highway as John Cena drove his SUV along the empty road, searching for a place to stop and eat. His stomach growled, reminding him that he hadn't had a proper meal in hours. Up ahead, a small roadside cafe came into view. The faded sign above the entrance read Mama D's Kitchen. The place looked old but welcoming, a classic mom-and-pop diner that had probably been around for decades. He slowed down, pulling into the nearly empty parking lot, noticing only one old truck parked near the entrance. Through the large front window, he could see that the cafe was quiet, almost too quiet. There were no customers in sight, only the warm glow of hanging lights illuminating the cozy interior. Cena stepped out of his vehicle and stretched his legs before heading to the entrance. The bell above the door gave a soft jingle as he pushed it open and stepped inside. Almost instantly, a loud clatter echoed through the cafe. His eyes darted toward the counter, where a young black waitress stood frozen in place, her eyes wide with shock. A glass she had been holding slipped from her fingers and crashed onto the floor, shattering into pieces. For a long moment, neither of them spoke. The girl looked like she had just seen a ghost. Her mouth opened slightly, as if trying to say something, but no words came out. Cena raised an eyebrow, amused by her reaction. You're real?" she finally managed to whisper. Cena smirked and gave her a small nod. "Yeah, I'm real, the one and only." The silence stretched between them before the girl suddenly let out a high-pitched squeal of excitement. She clutched her head in disbelief and jumped in place, her energy bursting through the quiet cafe like a firecracker. "Oh my God! Oh my God! Oh my God!" she screamed. "John Cena! This is not happening! This is not happening!" She spun around in circles before stopping abruptly and slamming her hands onto the counter. "I have so many questions. What are you doing here? Why this cafe? Do you eat real food? Do you even get hungry? Wait. She suddenly gasped. "I need proof. My friends will never believe me." Cena chuckled, leaning his arms on the counter. "Breathe," he said with a grin. "I just stopped for some food. And yeah, I eat real food. Can't build all this," he gestured to himself, "on protein shakes alone." The girl practically vibrated with excitement. "Oh man, my dad is going to flip. He's a huge fan, but he'll never believe me if I tell him you were here." Just then, a voice from the back interrupted the excitement. "What's all the damn hollering about out here?" A short, stocky black woman with graying curls and a floral apron emerged from the kitchen, wiping her hands on a rag. Her expression was a mix of amusement and impatience. She looked Cena up and down, unimpressed. "Who's this?" she asked, frowning slightly. The girl gasped, turning to her grandmother as if she had just asked the dumbest question in the world. "Grandma, that's John Cena." The older woman squinted at him for a moment, then pursed her lips. "You mean that wrestling man?" Cena chuckled. "That's me." The woman shook her head. Thought you'd be taller." The girl groaned. "Grandma, no. He's the GOAT, the legend, the 15-time champion, the movie star, the—" The old woman waved her hand. All right. You act like the man walked on water." She looked Cena up and down again. "You want something to eat, Are you just here to make my granddaughter lose her damn mind?" Cena grinned. "Actually, I was hoping for some good homemade food. Been on the road all day, and this place looked like the perfect spot." The grandmother crossed her arms, her tough exterior softening just a little. "Well, you got good taste, I'll give you that. Sit yourself down. I'll fix you something real good." Cena nodded appreciatively and found a seat at one of the small tables. The cafe was cozy, with checkered tablecloths and walls decorated with framed pictures of family members and customers who had probably been coming here for years. The warm smell of freshly cooked food filled the air, making his stomach rumble in anticipation. The young waitress, still buzzing with excitement, hurried over. Okay, but listen, I need a selfie. If I don't get a picture, my dad will think I'm making this up. And an autograph. No, 2. One for me, one for my dad. Actually, maybe 3. My cousin's a fan, too." Cena laughed. "How about we get that selfie after I eat?" She nodded eagerly. Yes. Oh my God, this is the best day of my life." The grandmother returned moments later, carrying a large plate of crispy fried chicken, creamy mashed potatoes, and warm cornbread. She set it down in front of Cena with an approving nod. "Eat up, wrestling man." Cena took a bite and immediately let out a satisfied groan. "This is incredible." The grandmother smirked. "Course it is. You're eating Mama D's cooking. Ain't nobody does it better." The girl clasped her hands together. "If my dad doesn't believe me about this, I'm never forgiving him." Cena grinned, savoring the food. The meal was exactly what he needed, and the company wasn't bad either. The excitement in the air was almost contagious, making him feel at home in the little cafe. But just as he was about to take another bite, a deep rumble echoed from outside, the sound of multiple engines approaching. Cena's senses sharpened. The young waitress and her grandmother exchanged nervous glances, and then the cafe door burst open with a violent crash. The loud crash of the cafe door slamming open sent a jolt through the room. Cena instinctively turned his head toward the entrance, his senses on high alert. 4 men walked in, their heavy boots thudding against the wooden floor. The air in the cafe shifted immediately, thickening with tension. The men were rough-looking bikers, clad in worn leather jackets, patches covering their vests, and scuffed boots. The leader, a tall man with a jagged scar running down his left cheek, stepped forward first, his expression twisted in a smug grin as he scanned the empty cafe. The young waitress tensed beside Cena, her hands clenching into fists. Her earlier excitement had drained completely, replaced with clear apprehension. Her grandmother, standing behind the counter, narrowed her eyes at the newcomers. Well, the leader drawled, dragging a gloved hand across the countertop. "Looks like we came at the perfect time. Quiet little spot, just how we like it." His voice was laced with something venomous, a tone that sent an uncomfortable chill through the cafe. He turned his gaze to the older woman, giving her a fake, toothy smile. "How's business, Mama D?" The grandmother didn't flinch, but the weight in her expression deepened. "What do you want, Carter?" The man chuckled, shaking his head as if the question amused him. "You already know what we want. It's the end of the month. Time for you to pay up." Cena's brow furrowed slightly as he glanced at the waitress beside him. She was rigid, biting the inside of her cheek, but the fire in her eyes hadn't dimmed. "She already told you last month," she said, her voice steadier than expected. "We're not paying you anything." One of the bikers, a broad-shouldered man with a buzz cut, let out a laugh. "Oh, she's got some bite, huh? Cute." The leader, Carter, leaned forward onto the counter, his fingers tapping rhythmically against the surface. His false smile vanished. "See, that's not really how this works, sweetheart," he said, his voice dropping into something far more dangerous. "We keep this place safe. We make sure no trouble comes knocking. You, in return, show your appreciation with a little donation." The young waitress exhaled sharply, her patience snapping. "You mean extortion. You don't protect anyone. You're the only trouble we ever have." A dangerous silence followed. Carter's grin was gone. His eyes darkened as he slowly turned his head to face her. "You've got quite the mouth on you," he muttered. The older woman stepped forward, her voice low but firm. "You don't talk to my granddaughter like that." Carter smirked again, though there was no humor in it. "Then maybe you should teach her some respect, Mama D." Another one of the bikers, a wiry man with tattoos covering his arms, reached into his jacket and pulled out a small, rusted metal pipe. He tapped it against the side of his palm. "You know," he said, grinning, "I'd hate to see this nice little place go up in smoke. Be a real shame." Cena had been watching in silence, his expression unreadable, but now he leaned forward slightly, resting his forearms on the table. "She said, you're not getting anything." He spoke calmly, his voice cutting through the thick tension. The bikers turned toward him, almost as if they were just now noticing his presence. Carter frowned at him for a long second before his lips curled in a smirk. "And who the hell are you?" Cena took his time before answering. He met Carter's gaze head-on, his tone casual but firm. "Just a guy here for lunch." The bikers glanced at each other before laughing. Carter shook his head. "Well, just a guy. This isn't your business. Why don't you finish your meal and mind your own damn—" The young waitress suddenly stepped forward, her voice rising. "He doesn't need to be part of this. You're the ones who came in here acting like you own the place." Carter's grin soured as he turned back toward her. "You really don't know when to shut up, do you?" His hand moved fast. Not a punch, but a sharp grab toward her wrist. The motion was meant to intimidate, to make her flinch, to show that he held control of the situation. But before he could make contact, Cena was already standing. His chair scraped back against the floor, the sudden movement startlingly loud in the quiet cafe. Carter's hand froze inches from the girl's arm. His gaze snapped toward Cena, who was now towering over him. Cena's voice was low, steady. "I think it's time for you to leave." Silence stretched for a beat too long. The bikers shifted uneasily, glancing between each other. Cena's presence was impossible to ignore now, his broad frame making the already small cafe feel even smaller. Carter narrowed his eyes, looking Cena up and down as if measuring him. "You think you're tough, huh?" Carter sneered. "What, you some kind of bodybuilder?" Cena didn't react. "I think you should take your boys and walk out that door." One of the bikers, the one with the pipe, let out a scoff. "You got a death wish, big guy?" The young waitress, still standing close to Cena, quickly whispered under her breath. "John, they're dangerous." Cena glanced at her briefly before looking back at the bikers. "No, they just think they are." Carter stared at him for a long moment before laughing dryly. "All right, tough guy. You want to play hero? Fine, we'll go." He gestured to his men, who exchanged uncertain glances before stepping back toward the door. Cena didn't move, keeping his eyes on them as they backed away. The tension was thick, but for a brief moment, it seemed like the situation had de-escalated. The bikers had taken the warning. Then, just as Carter reached the doorway, he moved fast. With a quick, practiced motion, he yanked a steel baton from inside his jacket and swung it toward Cena's head. The moment the attack came, Cena reacted. Carter's steel baton sliced through the air in a blur, aimed straight for Cena's head, but Cena had been expecting something like this. In the fraction of a second before impact, he moved. With the speed and precision of a trained athlete, he ducked under the swing, the baton narrowly missing his skull. Carter's momentum carried him forward, throwing him slightly off balance, and in that instant, Cena acted. His massive hand shot out, grabbing Carter's wrist mid-swing, twisting it with enough force to make the biker grunt in pain. The baton clattered onto the floor as Cena jerked Carter's arm downward, slamming it onto the counter. Carter cursed through clenched teeth, his free hand reaching for Cena's throat, but Cena intercepted it with his other hand, gripping the biker's forearm like a steel vise. The entire cafe froze in that moment, the other bikers stunned by how quickly their leader had lost control of the situation. Cena's voice was low and calm, but there was an unmistakable warning in his tone. Bad move. Before Carter could respond, Cena yanked him forward and drove his knee into the biker's stomach. The air rushed out of Carter's lungs in a harsh wheeze, his body doubling over from the force of the hit. Cena let go of him and Carter stumbled backward, knocking over a chair as he struggled to regain his breath. His face contorted in rage, but before he could recover, one of his men charged. The biker with the buzz cut, the one who had been laughing moments ago, now lunged at Cena with both fists raised. Cena sidestepped, letting the biker's momentum carry him forward before hooking an arm around his waist and lifting him effortlessly off the ground. In one smooth motion, Cena flipped the man over his shoulder and sent him crashing onto a nearby table. The wooden surface buckled under the impact, plates and silverware flying in all directions. The biker groaned. His body sprawled across the wreckage. The other two bikers snapped out of their hesitation. The tattooed one with the metal pipe rushed forward, swinging wildly at Cena's ribs. Cena twisted his body just in time to avoid a direct hit, the pipe skimming the edge of his shirt but failing to connect with flesh. With lightning-fast reflexes, Cena caught the biker's wrist mid-swing and delivered a powerful forearm strike to his chest. The force sent the man stumbling backward, his grip on the pipe loosening. Cena capitalized on the opening, grabbing the biker by his jacket and yanking him forward before driving an elbow into his jaw. The biker's head snapped back, and he crumpled onto the floor, unconscious before he even hit the ground. The last standing biker hesitated, gripping his own weapon, a hunting knife, tightly in his shaking hands. His eyes darted between Cena and his fallen comrades, panic beginning to set in. He took one step back toward the door, then another. Cena lifted his hand slightly, his voice almost bored. "You really want to try that?" The biker cursed under his breath before turning on his heel and sprinting out the door. The sound of his boots pounding against the pavement faded as he ran toward the motorcycles parked outside. Inside the cafe, the silence was deafening. The only sounds were the groans of the defeated bikers and the ragged breathing of Carter, who was still struggling to get up. Cena stood in the center of the chaos, unfazed. His breathing was steady, his posture relaxed, as if he had just completed a routine workout rather than taken down 4 armed thugs. The young waitress stared at him in absolute disbelief. Her mouth hung open slightly, her hands still clenched into fists from when she had braced herself for the worst. She had seen fights before, had even seen her father take down a couple of men when protecting the cafe, but this was something else entirely. You just, she stammered, trying to find the right words. Cena cracked his neck, rolling his shoulders. Took out the trash. A strained chuckle came from behind the counter. The old woman, still standing tall, had watched everything unfold with unwavering composure. Now she exhaled and shook her head. "Boy, You sure know how to handle yourself." Cena shrugged, stepping over the unconscious biker at his feet. Didn't seem like the type of guys who deserved a polite conversation. Carter groaned, finally dragging himself onto his hands and knees. He spit onto the floor, rage burning in his eyes as he glared up at Cena. You don't know what you just did," he wheezed. "You think this is over?" Cena crouched down to Carter's level, his gaze as sharp as a blade. "I don't think," he said simply. "I know." Carter's lips curled in anger, but before he could say another word, the sound of sirens pierced the air. The flashing red and blue lights from approaching police cars flooded through the cafe windows. The waitress exhaled sharply, some of the tension in her shoulders finally easing. "Looks like someone called the cops," she muttered. The old woman folded her arms, a satisfied expression on her face. "Damn right I did." Carter swore under his breath, knowing there was no way out of this. Within moments, uniformed officers were stepping into the cafe, hands on their holsters as they took in the wreckage. One of the officers, a tall black man with a thick mustache, raised an eyebrow as he looked around. His gaze settled on Cena, recognition flickering in his eyes. "Well, damn," he said slowly. "Never thought I'd be arresting criminals with John Cena's help." Cena smirked. "Happy to assist." The officers moved in quickly, cuffing Carter and the two bikers still conscious enough to resist. The officer who had spoken first turned back to Cena, tilting his head slightly. "You want to file a report? Give us a statement?" Cena glanced at the young waitress and her grandmother, both still watching him in awe. Then he looked down at his plate, which had somehow remained upright during the chaos. He nodded toward the food. "Let me finish lunch first." The tension in the cafe finally started to dissolve as the officers secured the remaining bikers in handcuffs and escorted them outside. The flashing red and blue lights from the squad cars cast flickering shadows through the cafe windows, making the wreckage inside look even more chaotic. The young waitress let out a breath she didn't realize she had been holding. She still couldn't believe what had just happened. In a matter of minutes, John Cena had single-handedly dismantled 4 men who had been terrorizing her family's business for months. The old woman, standing with her arms crossed, nodded approvingly at Cena before walking toward the kitchen as if nothing had happened. The officer with the thick mustache finished speaking into his radio before turning back to Cena, shaking his head in amusement. "You know, I've been on the force 20 years and I've seen a lot of fights," the officer said, "but I've never seen one end that fast." Cena, who had finally sat back down at his table, picked up his fork. "Guess you don't watch enough wrestling," he said with a smirk before taking another bite of mashed potatoes. The officer chuckled and looked over at the waitress. "You doing all right, kid?" She nodded, though her hands were still trembling slightly. Yeah, I think so." She glanced at Cena, her eyes filled with awe. "I mean, I just watched John Cena turn our cafe into WrestleMania, so, yeah, I'm fine." The officer grinned and turned back to his fellow officers as they led Carter and his gang toward the squad cars. Carter, despite being bruised and handcuffed, still held on to his arrogance. As he was being shoved into the back seat of the car, he turned his head toward the cafe and shouted, "This ain't over." Cena didn't even look up from his plate. "Sure it is," he said casually, cutting another piece of chicken. "You just don't know it yet." The officers finished loading the bikers into the vehicles, and within moments the flashing lights disappeared down the road. The cafe fell into a strange silence, as if the walls themselves were trying to process everything that had just happened. The young waitress sat down heavily in the chair across from Cena, her adrenaline finally wearing off. She stared at him, shaking her head. "You really just did that," she said, almost in disbelief. Cena looked up, chewing thoughtfully. "Did what?" She gestured wildly at the mess around them. "You just fought off 4 armed bikers like it was nothing. You flipped a dude onto a table. My grandma called the cops, and you just went back to eating." Cena shrugged. "Food's good. Didn't want it to get cold." The girl dropped her head onto the table with a groan. "I swear, my dad is never going to believe this. He's going to think I made the whole thing up." Cena leaned back in his chair. "Guess we'll have to make sure he knows it's real." Her head shot up. "Yes, we need proof. We need pictures. I need an autograph. If I don't get something, my dad is never going to forgive me." Cena laughed and reached for a napkin. All right, give me a pen." She scrambled behind the counter, grabbing a Sharpie before nearly tripping over herself in her excitement. She handed it to him with both hands like it was a sacred artifact. Cena signed the napkin with a quick flourish and handed it back to her. "There. Now you have proof." She stared at the signature like it was made of gold. Oh my God, my dad is going to lose his mind." The old woman finally returned from the kitchen, carrying a fresh plate of cornbread. She set it down in front of Cena with a smirk. "You handle yourself pretty well, wrestling man." Cena wiped his mouth with a napkin. "I try." She crossed her arms. "You know, my husband and I, we're big fans. We don't miss a single one of your matches. He always says you're one of the toughest men he's ever seen." Cena raised an eyebrow. "Sounds like a smart man." Her smirk faded slightly, replaced with a somber expression. "He's in the hospital right now." Cena's easygoing demeanor shifted. He set his fork down. "I'm sorry to hear that. What happened?" The old woman exhaled, glancing toward the front window. "Those bikers, they put him there. A couple weeks ago, he told them to leave us alone. They didn't like that. They jumped him outside, beat him so bad he couldn't even stand." The waitress lowered her head, her hands gripping the signed napkin tightly. Cena's jaw tightened. His eyes darkened, a flicker of anger crossing his face. He had already dealt with the bikers, but knowing that they had attacked an innocent man, a man just trying to protect his family, made his blood boil. "He's a fighter, though," the old woman continued. "Doctors say he'll recover, but it's going to take time." Cena nodded slowly. "He sounds tough." The young waitress forced a smile. "He is, and he's your biggest fan." Cena smiled back. "Then I'd love to meet him when he's better." The old woman studied him for a moment before nodding approvingly. "I think he'd like that." The door to the cafe suddenly creaked open again. Everyone turned toward the entrance, expecting another unwanted guest. Instead, the room filled with the low, distant rumble of motorcycles. Outside, just down the road, more headlights appeared. The young waitress swallowed hard. John?" Cena's gaze hardened as he stood up from his chair. "Stay behind the counter," he said. The old woman slowly stepped back, her eyes narrowing as she looked outside. A dozen motorcycles rolled to a stop in front of the cafe. The young waitress's heart pounded. "Oh no!" Cena cracked his knuckles. "Looks like they brought friends." The deep rumble of motorcycle engines vibrated through the ground as a dozen bikers lined up outside the cafe, their headlights casting long beams of light through the front windows. The atmosphere inside shifted instantly. The young waitress gripped the edge of the counter, her knuckles turning white. Her grandmother remained calm, her sharp eyes locked on the scene unfolding outside. Cena, standing at the center of the cafe, rolled his shoulders and exhaled slowly. He had expected retaliation, but he didn't think it would come this fast. Outside, the lead biker dismounted his motorcycle first. He was bigger than Carter, with a thick beard and long, graying hair tied back in a ponytail. His leather vest had the words "Iron Reapers" stitched across the back in blood-red lettering. The others followed his lead, stepping off their bikes one by one. The gang moved like a pack of wolves, slow and deliberate, their heavy boots crunching against the gravel. The bearded man strode toward the entrance, his piercing eyes locked on the cafe. The door creaked open. He stepped inside, his presence immediately filling the room. The air felt thick with unspoken tension. Cena watched him carefully, noting the way the other bikers lingered just outside, blocking off any possible escape. The bearded man took a slow look around, his gaze passing over the broken chairs, overturned tables, and the unconscious bikers still sprawled across the floor. His expression remained unreadable as he finally turned his attention to Cena. "You must be the one who did all this," he said, his voice gravelly but calm. Cena met his gaze without hesitation. "They started it." The man gave a small nod, glancing down at Carter, who was still slumped against the counter, barely conscious. He sighed, rubbing his temple. "This idiot never did know when to shut up," he muttered. Then his gaze flicked back to Cena. "But you just walked into something you don't understand." Cena remained unmoved. "Looks pretty simple to me. Your guys walked in here looking for trouble. They found it." The older biker let out a short chuckle, though there was no humor in it. "You think this is over?" He shook his head. "Carter and his crew, they were just handling collection. But now it's my problem. And I don't like having problems." Cena stepped forward slightly, placing himself between the bikers and the two women behind the counter. "You've got two options. Walk away now, or find out just how big of a problem I can be." The gang behind the leader shifted, a few of them letting out low chuckles, amused by Cena's confidence. One of the bikers, a thick-necked man with tattoos creeping up his jawline, cracked his knuckles. Another gripped the chain hanging from his belt. They were waiting for the order. The leader exhaled, glancing around the room one last time. His eyes lingered on the grandmother, then the waitress. There was something calculating in his gaze. He wasn't just sizing up Cena, he was evaluating everything. Finally, he spoke. "You don't get it. This place is just a speck of dust on the map, but me?" He tapped his chest. "I run everything between here and 2 states over. Nobody crosses me without paying the price." Cena tilted his head slightly. "You sure? Because from where I'm standing, looks like you're about to lose even more men." The bikers tensed. The waitress sucked in a breath, pressing herself closer to the counter. The bearded leader studied Cena for a moment longer. Then, instead of raising his fists, he smirked. "All right then," he said, his tone unsettlingly even. "We'll leave. For now." The bikers behind him shifted uneasily, clearly not expecting their leader to back down so quickly. But the older man turned and made his way toward the door, forcing them to follow. As he stepped outside, he called over his shoulder, "Enjoy your little victory, big guy, because next time you won't see it coming." With that, he mounted his motorcycle. The others hesitated for a few seconds, reluctant, before following suit. Then, one by one, the engines roared back to life. The headlights flashed once more through the cafe windows before the gang finally peeled away, disappearing into the night. Inside the cafe, The silence felt almost deafening. The waitress let out a shaky breath, her fingers still gripping the counter. Her grandmother was the first to break the quiet. "They'll be back," she said simply. Cena nodded, his expression unreadable. "Yeah," he said, "I know." The cafe remained eerily silent even after the sound of the motorcycles had faded into the distance. The young waitress finally let go of the counter, flexing her fingers as if she had been holding on for dear life. Her grandmother, still standing behind her, stared at the door with an unreadable expression. Cena slowly exhaled, rolling his shoulders as he processed everything that had just happened. He wasn't stupid. The leader of the bikers hadn't left out of fear. That man had left because he had another plan in mind. Cena turned toward the two women. "You need to be ready," he said, his voice calm but firm. "They're not done with you." The old woman nodded, her eyes sharp. "I know that," she said. "I knew that the second they walked in." The young waitress swallowed hard. "So, what do we do?" Cena pulled out a chair and sat down, thinking for a moment. "First, we make sure you're safe. That means locking up early, keeping a phone nearby at all times, and not being alone out here. Second, we get the police involved more seriously. They already arrested some of them, but that's not enough. We need to put real pressure on them." The grandmother shook her head. "The cops?" she scoffed. "They'll come when it's convenient for them, but when it really matters, we're on our own." Cena met her gaze. "Not this time." The young waitress frowned, glancing toward the window. I don't get it. Why us? There are bigger places in town. Why are they so set on making our lives miserable?" Her grandmother sighed, rubbing her temples. "Because this place is ours," she said simply. "Because we don't bend. That's all it takes to make people like them mad." Cena studied the room. The cafe wasn't just a business. It was a home. The walls were lined with old photos, some black and white, some faded but still filled with life. Pictures of customers, family, and moments that meant something. The place had history, and that was something thugs like those bikers couldn't understand. "Your husband," Cena said after a moment, his voice quieter. "What exactly happened?" The old woman's expression darkened. "He stood up to them," she said, "told them they weren't getting a damn cent out of us. They waited until he was locking up one night, then they jumped him. 4 of them, beat him down, and left him lying in the dirt." The young waitress's hands curled into fists, "and no one did anything about it." Cena's jaw tightened. "That changes now." Before either of them could respond, the cafe phone rang. The sound was so sharp in the quiet space that all 3 of them jumped slightly. The grandmother walked over and picked up the receiver, her expression wary. "Mama D's kitchen," she said cautiously. There was a long pause, then a voice, deep and slow. "Nice place you got there." Cena's eyes narrowed as he immediately stood up. The young waitress's face paled. The old woman kept her voice steady. "What do you want?" The man on the other end chuckled softly. "Oh, I think you know. Tonight was just a warning. You should have taken our offer when you had the chance." Cena stepped closer, listening. The old woman didn't flinch. "You think we're scared?" The voice on the phone hummed. "No, that's the problem, but we'll fix that soon enough." Then the line went dead. The old woman slowly lowered the phone. The young waitress was already shaking her head. "That was him, wasn't it?" Cena nodded. "Yeah, and that means they're not waiting for later." As if on cue, the distant sound of motorcycles filled the air once more. But this time, they weren't stopping outside. They were circling. The grandmother moved quickly, locking the front door and flipping off the main lights. Cena strode toward the window, peeking through the blinds. He counted at least 10 bikes, their headlights flashing as they moved in slow loops around the cafe like vultures. "They're trying to rattle us," Cena muttered. The young waitress hugged herself. "It's working." Cena turned back toward them. "We need to be smart, stay low, don't make it easy for them." A loud bang echoed from the back of the cafe. The rear door. Someone was trying to get in. The grandmother's face remained unreadable, but her hands were steady as she reached beneath the counter and pulled out an old baseball bat. Cena nodded approvingly. "Good call." The banging grew louder. Someone was kicking the door now. Cena motioned for them to stay put as he moved toward the back, his steps careful and measured. The closer he got, the clearer he could hear them talking. "Break it down already," one voice hissed. "Almost there," another grunted. Cena pressed his back to the wall beside the door, inhaling slowly. Then, with precise timing, he reached out and yanked the door open himself. The two bikers on the other side stumbled forward, caught off guard. Before they could react, Cena grabbed the closest one by his jacket and slammed him against the wall. The second tried to swing at him, but Cena ducked, countering with a quick elbow strike to the ribs that sent the man doubling over in pain. The first biker struggled, trying to reach for something in his pocket, but Cena grabbed him by the collar and lifted him clean off the ground. "You really don't learn, do you?" he muttered before throwing him aside like a rag doll. The second biker, still gasping for air, stumbled backward. You don't know who you're messing with?" Cena advanced on him. "I'm getting a pretty good idea." The biker panicked and turned to run, but before he could make it, the cafe door swung open violently. The bearded leader from earlier stepped inside. He wasn't smiling this time. Cena let go of the groaning biker at his feet, his full attention shifting toward the man in the doorway. The bearded leader's voice was cold. "You really should have walked away." Cena exhaled slowly, adjusting his stance. "Funny, I was just about to say the same thing to you." The air between them turned electric, the weight of the moment settling like a storm ready to break. The young waitress whispered, "John?" Cena's eyes never left the leader's. "Stay back," he said. Then the bikers attacked. The bearded leader didn't hesitate. The moment Cena shifted his stance, two of his men lunged at him from opposite sides. Cena ducked under the first attack, his instincts razor-sharp, and drove his fist into the gut of the biker on his right. The man let out a choked gasp, stumbling backward as the air was forced from his lungs. The second biker swung a heavy chain at Cena's head. Cena studied the room. The cafe wasn't just a business. It was a home. The walls were lined with old photos, some black and white, some faded but still filled with life. Pictures of customers, family, and moments that meant something. The place had history, and that was something thugs like those bikers couldn't understand. "Your husband," Cena said after a moment, his voice quieter. "What exactly happened?" The old woman's expression darkened. "He stood up to them," she said, "told them they weren't getting a damn cent out of us. They waited until he was locking up one night, then they jumped him. 4 of them. Beat him down and left him lying in the dirt." The young waitress's hands curled into fists, and no one did anything about it. Cena's jaw tightened. That changes now. Before either of them could respond, the cafe phone rang. The sound was so sharp in the quiet space that all 3 of them jumped slightly. The grandmother walked over and picked up the receiver, her expression wary. "Mama D's kitchen," she said cautiously. There was a long pause. Then a voice, deep and slow. Nice place you got there. Cena's eyes narrowed as he immediately stood up. The young waitress's face paled. The old woman kept her voice steady. "What do you want?" The man on the other end chuckled softly. "Oh, I think you know. Tonight was just a warning. You should have taken our offer when you had the chance." Cena stepped closer, listening. The old woman didn't flinch. "You think we're scared?" The voice on the phone hummed. "No, that's the problem, but we'll fix that soon enough." Then the line went dead. The old woman slowly lowered the phone. The young waitress was already shaking her head. "That was him, wasn't it?" Cena nodded. "Yeah, and that means they're not waiting for later." As if on cue, the distant sound of motorcycles filled the air once more. But this time, they weren't stopping outside. They were circling. The grandmother moved quickly, locking the front door and flipping off the main lights. Cena strode toward the window, peeking through the blinds. He counted at least 10 bikes, their headlights flashing as they moved in slow loops around the cafe like vultures. "They're trying to rattle us," Cena muttered. The young waitress hugged herself. "It's working." Cena turned back toward them. "We need to be smart. Stay low. Don't make it easy for them." A loud bang echoed from the back of the cafe. The rear door. Someone was trying to get in. The grandmother's face remained unreadable, but her hands were steady as she reached beneath the counter and pulled out an old baseball bat. Cena nodded approvingly. "Good call." The banging grew louder. Someone was kicking the door now. Cena motioned for them to stay put as he moved toward the back, his steps careful and measured. The closer he got, the clearer he could hear them talking. "Break it down already," one voice hissed. "Almost there," another grunted. Cena pressed his back to the wall beside the door, inhaling slowly. Then, with precise timing, he reached out and yanked the door open himself. The 2 bikers on the other side stumbled forward, caught off guard. Before they could react, Cena grabbed the closest one by his jacket and slammed him against the wall. The second tried to swing at him, but Cena ducked, countering with a quick elbow strike to the ribs that sent the man doubling over in pain. The first biker struggled, trying to reach for something in his pocket, but Cena grabbed him by the collar and lifted him clean off the ground. "You really don't learn, do you?" he muttered before throwing him aside like a rag doll. The second biker, still gasping for air, stumbled backward. You don't know who you're messing with." Cena advanced on him. "I'm getting a pretty good idea." The biker panicked and turned to run, but before he could make it, the cafe door swung open violently. The bearded leader from earlier stepped inside. He wasn't smiling this time. Cena let go of the groaning biker at his feet, his full attention shifting toward the man in the doorway. The bearded leader's voice was cold. "You really should have walked away." Cena exhaled slowly, adjusting his stance. "Funny. I was just about to say the same thing to you." The air between them turned electric, the weight of the moment settling like a storm ready to break. The young waitress whispered, "John?" Cena's eyes never left the leader's. "Stay back," he said. Then the bikers attacked. The bearded leader didn't hesitate. The moment Cena shifted his stance, 2 of his men lunged at him from opposite sides. Cena ducked under the first attack, his instincts razor-sharp, and drove his fist into the gut of the biker on his right. The man let out a choked gasp, stumbling backward as the air was forced from his lungs. The second biker swung a heavy chain at Cena's head, but Cena dodged just in time, the metal links missing his face by mere inches. Before the man could recover, Cena grabbed his arm and yanked him forward, sending him crashing into a nearby table with a loud crack. The bearded leader watched from the doorway, his arms crossed, expression unreadable. The remaining bikers didn't hesitate, swarming Cena in an attempt to overwhelm him. One of them managed to land a hit, his fist slamming into Cena's ribs, but Cena barely flinched. He turned and grabbed the attacker by the back of his neck, driving his forehead straight into the biker's face. The man crumpled instantly, blood trickling from his nose as he hit the floor. Behind the counter, the young waitress and her grandmother watched in tense silence. The old woman still gripped the baseball bat, her fingers white around the handle. The girl swallowed hard, whispering, "This is insane." Cena caught movement from the corner of his eye, another biker charging at him with a wooden chair, swinging it like a weapon. Cena braced himself and caught the chair mid-swing, ripping it from the biker's hands and shoving him backward. The man stumbled, and Cena used the moment to deliver a brutal uppercut that sent him sprawling onto the ground, unmoving. The bearded leader finally moved. He reached into his leather vest and pulled out a steel baton, flicking it open with a snap. He took a slow step forward, his gaze locked onto Cena's, unshaken by what he had just witnessed. "You've got skill," he admitted, rolling his shoulders, "but skill doesn't mean a damn thing against the inevitable." Cena exhaled, rolling his own shoulders. "That supposed to scare me?" The leader smirked. "No, this is—" With lightning speed, he swung the baton at Cena's ribs. Cena barely managed to block it with his forearm, the impact reverberating through his muscles. The leader followed up with another quick strike, this time aimed at Cena's knee. Cena stepped back just in time, narrowly avoiding the hit. The man was fast, too fast for his size. Cena had faced plenty of tough opponents in the ring, but this was different. There were no rules here, no referee to stop the fight. This man fought dirty, and he was used to winning. The leader feinted left, then struck right, his baton aiming for Cena's side. Cena caught it mid-air with his bare hand, yanking the man forward and slamming his elbow into his jaw. The leader stumbled, but he recovered quickly, spinning and delivering a sharp kick to Cena's leg. Cena felt the impact but planted his feet firmly, refusing to go down. They circled each other now, both breathing heavily, both waiting for the other to make a mistake. The other bikers groaned on the floor, defeated, but this fight was far from over. Behind them, the young waitress watched, eyes wide. "Come on, John," she whispered. The bearded leader smirked again, blood trickling from the corner of his mouth. "You're strong," he said, "but strength alone won't win this." Cena cracked his neck. "Good thing I've got more than just strength." The leader lunged. Cena anticipated it this time, stepping to the side and grabbing the man by his vest. In one smooth motion, he lifted him off the ground and delivered his signature move, an attitude adjustment straight onto the counter. The impact was brutal. The wooden counter cracked under the force as the leader's body slammed against it. He let out a guttural groan before going completely still, his limbs sprawled limply over the broken surface. Silence. The young waitress blinked in shock. Her grandmother let out a long breath. Cena straightened, rolling his shoulders as he looked around the wrecked cafe. "Anyone else?" he asked, his voice calm. No answer. The last conscious biker, the one who had tried to run earlier, raised his hands in surrender. "Nope, I'm good." The sound of sirens filled the air again. The young waitress exhaled sharply. "Oh, now they show up." Cena turned toward the two women, his expression softening. "You two okay?" The grandmother nodded, gripping her bat a little less tightly. "Better now." As the police stormed into the cafe, weapons drawn, Cena raised his hands in mock surrender. The mustached officer from earlier stepped in, taking one look at the destruction before shaking his head. "You again?" Cena smirked. "Told you I wasn't done eating." The officer sighed. "All right, someone start explaining what the hell happened here." The young waitress grinned. "Oh, you're gonna love this story." The flashing red and blue lights bathed the cafe in an eerie glow as the officers moved quickly, rounding up the unconscious and groaning bikers scattered across the wrecked dining area. The mustached officer, now visibly exhausted by the absurdity of the situation, rubbed his forehead before turning to Cena. His gaze flickered between the destruction, the shattered chairs, the broken counter, the pile of battered criminals, and the completely unbothered man standing in the middle of it all. Cena, arms crossed, raised an eyebrow. "Took you guys long enough." The officer let out a sigh. "I don't even know where to start with this." The young waitress, still riding the adrenaline high, grinned and stepped forward. "Well, officer, it all started when a gang of thugs decided to pick the wrong cafe to mess with. And then, boom, John Cena happened." Cena chuckled, shaking his head as the officer turned back to him. "I assume you want a statement?" The officer folded his arms. "No, I want a drink. But since I'm on duty, yeah, I need a statement." The grandmother, still holding her baseball bat, finally stepped forward. "Officer, these men have been harassing us for months. They put my husband in the hospital, they threatened us, and tonight they tried to come back and finish what they started. But John here made sure that didn't happen." The officer gave a slow nod. "And you can confirm all of this?" The waitress scoffed. "Are you kidding? We'll testify in court. We'll write a whole novel about it if you want." The officer sighed, pulling out his notepad. "All right, let's get this down officially." As statements were taken and more officers arrived, Cena took a step back, finally letting the weight of the night settle in. He had been in plenty of fights before, but this one felt different. This wasn't about championships or entertainment. This was real. And looking at the young waitress and her grandmother, he knew he had done the right thing. An ambulance arrived shortly after, taking away the worst of the injured bikers, including their leader, who was still unconscious after his hard landing on the counter. As he was being loaded onto the stretcher, Carter, still groggy but awake, locked eyes with Cena. "You think this is over?" he muttered, voice hoarse. Cena didn't blink. "I know it is." Carter's glare faltered, as if, deep down, he knew Cena was right. The doors shut, and the ambulance pulled away into the night. The young waitress turned to Cena, her smile beaming. "You were amazing. Seriously, I'm never going to stop talking about this. My dad is going to freak out when he hears what happened." Cena smirked. "Speaking of your dad, how about we make sure he believes you?" She gasped, grabbing her phone and practically shoving it into his hands. "Yes, we need a selfie. I need an autograph. He laughed, snapping a picture with her before grabbing a napkin and signing it with a simple note. "Never give up. John Cena." She clutched it like it was a winning lottery ticket. "This is going straight on the wall." Her grandmother smiled, shaking her head. "You're a good man, Cena, and you've got a damn good right hook." Cena chuckled. "I try." The mustached officer approached again, tucking his notepad away. "All right, we've got everything we need. You're free to go, but, maybe try not to level another cafe anytime soon." Cena smirked. "No promises." As the officers packed up and the last of the sirens faded into the distance, the cafe finally felt at peace again. The destruction was still there, the furniture still broken, but the weight of fear had been lifted. Cena turned toward the grandmother. "You're going to be okay?" She nodded. "We always are." The young waitress grinned. "And now we've got a John Cena story to tell for the rest of our lives." Cena chuckled, giving them both a nod before heading toward the door. He stepped outside, inhaling the crisp night air. His SUV was still parked at the curb, waiting for him. As he reached for the handle, he heard the young waitress call out one last time. "Hey, John!" He turned. She pointed at the cafe's wall near the door. "We're putting your picture right there, next to my dad's favorite boxing poster." Cena smiled. "I'll be honored." With that, he got into his SUV, started the engine, and drove off into the night, leaving behind a cafe that would never forget the night they were saved by John Cena. Justice has been served, but was it enough? Some fights leave more than just broken tables. They leave lasting marks. What do you think about what happened today? Let us know in the comments. If you enjoyed this story, don't forget to like, subscribe, and hit that notification bell so you never miss a new video. See you in the next one.